Hi there, this is Cindy Liu with CHRO Partners, and I am thrilled today to have some guest speakers to talk to us about succession planning for leadership, a roadmap for success. And I'm thrilled to introduce Rich Floersch and Susan Madonia. Rich is the prior CHRO for McDonald's Corporation, and he's currently a senior strategic advisor for HR Policy Association. And my friend Susan Madonia is a partner at ECC, also known as Executive Coaching Connection. So welcome, Susan and Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to get started with Susan first. Susan, I understand that there's some really revealing statistics as it relates to CEO turnover and succession. Could you share some of those stats with us?
Sure. Actually, some very interesting data points I'd like to share with everybody. So first off, one of the data points that caught our organization's eye was that nearly about 20% of the 2,500 largest public companies in the world experienced a CEO change in 2018. That was nearly 1 in every 5 companies. Secondly, we also saw that in the U.S., in 2018, the highest CEO turnover in the past decade happened with 1,450 CEOs departing, and that was up 25% versus 2017. Now, when you think about that and the planning that goes around that velocity of change at the higher level, there were also some additional data points that we found tremendously interesting. One being that over 3/4 of all CEOs globally reported that there was really no successor ready for their role. And last but not least, about 60% or 3 out of every 5 CEOs indicated that there was not even a comprehensive succession plan for the CEO role. So Cindy, as you can see, there are some interesting statistics that somewhat provide a gap of supporting that CEO role going forward.
So that is really startling to hear. I'm shocked, quite frankly. I think I sort of have heard that, but it's amazing when you actually hear those numbers. So we're really lucky to have Rich here today, who has had a little bit of experience with CEO succession planning in his role at McDonald's. And so Rich, maybe you can share with us your model as it relates to CEO succession planning when you're at McDonald's and just how critical it became for the organization.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely critical. And those numbers really are kind of startling when you think about it. But 12 years, I was the head of HR at McDonald's, and I worked on 4 different CEO successions. So what I'll try and do is go through each one of them with kind of the key learnings that I took out of each one. The little bit of business context. McDonald's at the time that I came in from the outside was struggling. It was in a turnaround. The board had actually brought a retired executive back who ran the international operations to run McDonald's and to lead the turnaround. And so I was on board about 5 months when we had our worldwide convention scheduled. And every 2 years we have a convention where we bring in 15,000 franchisees, suppliers, and management employees and talk about the strategies going forward. Well, the night before his keynote address, our CEO suffered a fatal heart attack in his hotel room. So I got a call early in the morning. The board actually attends the conventions, and the entire board was there. And luckily, the CEO who had passed away had talked to the board about an emergency successor. And that emergency successor was the president. So I'm not about to claim any credit for that, given I was only on board for 5 months, but we were able to announce a new CEO before the market even opened. And I know it was talked about in the press as kind of a model of how the board can do it right when you have one of these emergency situations. So new CEO, he's from Australia, started out in the operations track, ran Australia, ended up running Asia Pacific, ran Europe, then became president, had all the operating groups and marketing. Great background for the job, early 40s. 2 weeks into his tenure, he gets diagnosed with cancer. And he put on a brave fight, continued to lead the organization. Again, we're in the midst of a turnaround, and ended up actually having to resign because of some of the fact that the illness was just taking over.
I remember hearing about that in the news.
Yes, yes. And what we did was we started working with our non-exec chair about internal candidates, just so that we were ready. We had 2 candidates in mind that we were going to be presenting to the board for consideration. And I got that question from the non-exec chair: if it was your company, what would you do? And I considered the circumstances, the track records, some of the personal characteristics of the individuals, and made a recommendation. The board ended up deciding on that particular individual. He had an 8-year run. Stock went from 20s up to 100, and became CEO of the year. During that time, we really improved our talent management protocols, did a lot of investment in our leadership development, and really kind of used some of these horrible circumstances to really uplift our game in terms of talent management.
Let me ask you, this person that you nominated or recommended to the board, what time frame was that? Like, was it right after he found the second CEO found out they were ill, or was it after you all heard about that?
It was leading up to the time that the CEO resigned.
Okay.
So that the board was going to be ready with the recommendation.
Yeah, smart.
And then, you know, would have a new CEO take over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, no gap in kind of leadership. Very important during a turnaround that you have that kind of stability and consistency. We worked very closely together, the CEO and myself, in terms of identifying internal candidates for the job. Company was continuing to perform extremely well. We had a very strong slate of candidates. The board narrowed it down to 1. They made the decision to go with this individual, and everything looked terrific. Unfortunately, about 6 to 9 months into his tenure, the business started to move sideways, the momentum stalled, and some of us started to think about that we needed a new strategic direction. And I started taking a look at our bench and not being all that confident in our bench. So came up with the idea to bring back one of our executives that had left the company, who's a high potential executive. He went to private equity, ended up getting the CEO and the board to approve bringing him back. And he came in as our chief brand officer, again, hoping that this would improve the chances of being able to kind of get through this tough patch. Our execution was not as sharp as it should be. Our pace of change was not as strong as it should be in a turnaround. And the board made the decision to actually appoint the person we brought back into the company as our CEO. He's been the CEO now for 4.5 years. When he took over, the stock was at 100. It's now trading somewhere around 210. Great background, finance, operations, marketing, ran the UK, ran Europe, chief brand officer, and it turned around the UK operation, and kind of using similar principles in terms of the turnaround of the McDonald's organization.
So
those are the 4, Cindy, that I worked on, and each one very unique.
Yeah, interesting. So the last one wasn't just internal succession planning, but you were pipelining externally. Yes,
and it's an interesting. It was not a specific strategy to consider, what's called, I guess, a boomerang hire. Mm-hmm. But I would encourage people to think broadly about that option, because there probably are some people that have left your company that you might want to entice back. And some of the advantages you have is they understand the culture, and they've been a bit of an objective observer on the organization, and can come back and really have a very strong mandate for change.
Right, and if they really are that high potential, maybe there just wasn't enough room for them to move up quick enough, right? So,
exactly. Right, and the interesting thing, the experience that this individual got, with private equity made him actually a stronger executive in a turnaround situation than just simply corporate experience.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's clear that your succession planning at McDonald's was really critical during quite a tumultuous time for the organization. And well, I can't imagine if you hadn't been, it's almost like lightning can't strike 3 times, right? So it's almost like easy for you to just relax and be like, okay, we got that one done.
Right.
But you were very diligent about continuing to be disciplined about that process. What were some of the key benefits? I mean, I think it's sort of obvious, but both internally and externally, other than the stock price, what was the message?
I think, if you think about the different stakeholders in this regard, the first one being kind of your management team as a stakeholder. If you're not demonstrating that you're taking CEO succession seriously, and then you're making sure that your development plans aren't sharp and focused for the individuals, I'm not sure that you can talk about the importance of talent management to the rest of your company if you're not demonstrating it at the very top. So that's number one. I think the other stakeholder is your board. The board, I think, has to feel like there's a lot of, that they want confidence that there's a lot of strong development planning going on deep into the organization so that individuals with great potential can be elevated up for consideration. The other thing I would say, again, just more from a McDonald's experience, if we didn't have an internal successor ready when we had the tragedy, and then the second tragedy, I think the turnaround, if we had to go to the outside, I think the turnaround could have been stalled because you're bringing somebody in with not a lot of ownership in the turnaround strategy. So I think that from a employee standpoint was real important. And then importantly, investors today, they're looking at how strong companies perform CEO succession, how strong their C-suite is, and even now, your next generation of talent. And if they don't get a strong sense that there's a strong talent management system in place with succession, they may not decide to invest in your stock.
Yeah, it's something I'm reading a lot about NACD and how much the boards are getting deep into not just CEO succession, but all the way down the further down the chain. And you're right, if you're not taking it seriously at the very top, how can the rest of the organization really feel like you're watching out for their careers?
Exactly.
Yeah. So are there any particular steps you would say and that you would advise the CHROs who are out there right now trying to put together a plan?
Yeah. I actually thought about this from the standpoint of how CHROs can kind of make sure that they're integral in the process of CEO succession. The first one I would say is you could play a really strong role in helping the board establish CEO criteria. What do they consider to be the success criteria for the next CEO? And that means taking a forward-looking look, not a backward-looking. So what are the different strategies that we're going to be embarking on as a company? How would they inform the type of CEO we're looking for? So, and keeping it updated. I would say every year, work with the board to put together an updated CEO criteria. The second thing is boards like to, and they should have multiple options that they can narrow down to one over time. And that means really doing a really good job of evaluating your internal candidates, putting them into situations where you can test them with their learning agility. How adaptive are they? Because that step up from the C-suite into the CEO level is a pretty big one. So testing them with cross-functional moves, testing them if you have the opportunity with cross-geographic moves, bringing in some people maybe from different industries and seeing how they adapt into your particular industry. These are all good predictors of somebody's ability to be able to kind of figure it out when they get to that CEO level.
Yeah.
Think broadly about the candidate pool, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
This notion of boomerang hires could be an interesting one. And then the final one that I'd recommend is avoid the exhale factor. And what I mean by that is the board's made the decision on the CEO, the job's done. You know, in my mind, you're about halfway through. Now is the time to start working on the onboarding program. How do you set the new CEO up for success? How do you make sure that they have a good 60, 90-day, 6-month plan, and make sure that the board is signed off on it so that there's alignment between how that person is going to kind of get off to a good start and the role the board is going to play on it. So those are the things I think CHROs can really play an integral role in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you talk about this, and I think about some of the organizations that don't have a CHRO actually reporting to the CEO, I'm like, how do you do that, right? You're recommending your peers. You know, that's hard enough, but imagine if you reported to one of those C-suite executives other than the CEO.
Yeah, no, I would think that for these kinds of things with respect to working directly with the board on CEO succession and also working with the comp committee chair on rewards, having that ability to be able to work closely with the CEO is vitally important.
Yeah, not to go on a tangent, but there's still many companies that don't have a CHR reporting to the CEO. And I'm surprised if they're a public company that the analysts aren't going, well, why is that? You know?
Yeah. Well, you know what though, Cindy, I think between some of the investor concerns about how strong companies are on things like human capital, I think those numbers are going to be fewer and fewer.
Yeah. All right. So just to recap, so helping the board with the CEO criteria, considering boomerangs, and avoid the exhale factor, meaning don't just get them on board, but you've got to help them be successful in the first 60, 90, 120 days.
Yeah, one of the things that we did at McDonald's was once we knew that there was going to be a CEO succession, we would bring the CFO, the GC, the head of investor relations, the head of communications, and myself, and we would actually map out a 6-month onboarding plan that would be a straw man proposal for the CEO to kind of put their imprint on, and then ultimately review it with in this case, the non-exec chair to make sure that there's alignment.
I love that. And I know that you were brought on board to be disruptive, which is probably a word that was so foreign back,
I don't remember using that word back then.
I wanted you to change things up, so I can see you did that for sure. And so when you think about, I guess, the importance of having a mentor or an advisor, someone who has actually been through this to help you navigate this process, not like you had that. I don't know, maybe you did. Did you have somebody that helped you with that?
I'd probably a non-traditional one, Cindy, in the sense that I built up a very good working relationship with the non-exec chair who was on other boards and, had a very good understanding of where the board was on certain topics. And he was invaluable to me in terms of, and every time that we reviewed talent management with the board, our non-exec chair would introduce the topic as, this is our number one responsibility as a board. And that speaks volumes when you have somebody like that introduces the topic that way.
Right. But yeah, having somebody who can guide you along that path is so critical, I think, not just, advice from a book, right? But somebody who's actually been there and done that. So from the perspective of the ECC's Executive Partner Program, does that address the ability, if somebody doesn't have that executive chair like you did?
Yeah. Well, I've actually been working with some, new CHROs since I've left McDonald's a few years ago, and, which I really enjoyed. But the two things that seem to come up the most is, that new CHROs don't have a lot of experience in is, how do I begin working with the board on succession, not just at the CEO level, but at the C-suite? And then how do I work with the comp committee chair on things like the reward strategy? In some cases, they either have some talent experience or they have some compensation experience, or they may not have a lot of both. But I would have those are the two areas that I probably spend the most time on with them. And the other thing is through the association that I work with, we do offer a course called CEOSuccession, and it is targeted towards new CHROs. And we actually do bring in former CEOs and CHROs to talk about their own succession and some of the lessons learned so that you can broaden some of the perspectives that somebody might have going in. Because like I said, each one of these, even the four, each one of these was unique within McDonald's, and they're going to be across each company as well.
Yeah, that's great. You know, and I'm curious, Susan, from your perspective, I know you have a program called Executive Partner, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. And, you know, if you're not as lucky as Rich to have that, you know, executive person or executive committee.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's, you know, it's really interesting because when I spoke of some of the data points on the front end of the call, and we were, you know, seeing a lot of turnover at the higher ends of the organization, we at ECC were getting calls in for help and support around this very dimension, not only for the CEO, but C-suite leaders. And the calls would go something like this. We have a talented leader. Our CFO is planning to leave on retirement for a year. We need to accelerate his or her development and get them ready for that next step. Can you help? And, or it could be a number of other calls similar to that, but it was around accelerating development and helping essentially with the succession planning at the C-suite level. So after getting many, many calls like that, we decided to really bridge that gap or be part of the solution to the gap. And we actually have been blessed in that we brought in a number of CEOs, C-suite leaders that have tremendous board experience, tremendous experience in every functional area, some past CFOs, CMOs, Chief Human Resource Officers like Rich. And these are people who came to us and said, we really would love to give back. We would love to share some of what we've learned, some of the mistakes we made, some of the successes we've had, and be able to share that with others so that they can grow and we can help them accelerate with some of the issues that they have. And like Rich mentioned, there's not really a pattern. Everyone is unique and different, but we have an amazing cadre of executive partners to support that gap.
Yeah. So, Rich, would that have been useful when you were the CHRO?
Oh my goodness.
Your executives?
Oh my goodness. That first year would have been so nice to have had a sounding board, somebody who had, you know, it probably not even gone through those particular circumstances necessarily, but just somebody to be able to kind of bounce things off of. And, you know, I really do believe those first 6 to 9 months that you've been promoted into that C-suite are so critical. And somebody who's been there and been successful, I think can really help make sure that you avoid any sort of mistakes along the way.
Right. You like the program so much you signed up to be an executive partner, right?
Yes. Yes. Wasn't that difficult to sign up for, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Susan, how's it different than traditional coaching?
Yeah, I love that question because, you know, frankly, we spent a lot of time thinking about that, and frankly, bringing in executive partners to help us really think through what problems are we going to solve in the marketplace. And I would say this, just to summarize how it differs. I would say our executive partners are one part coaching, couple parts mentoring and advising. So instead of a pure coaching role, they're really bringing forth their wealth of experience from a mentoring spot. I've been there, I've sat in that chair, and I might be able to share with you some key learnings. And we also have some executive partners right now who slide into the advising spot. And it can be kind of a continuum of all three supports depending upon the need. I think the most important thing is that they really, our executive partners really provide, and Rich hit on this confidential sounding board. It's a safe place to go with someone who's got your back, and it's confidential. So that partnership, that relationship protects, you know, the executive. They can ask any questions and bounce any ideas back and forth. So it's been so far really successful, and it seems to have hit that gap between a lot of velocity and change at the C-suite level. And if we can help with filling the gap in, we may very well be one part of the solution. And as Rich identified, there's several pieces to the puzzle here.
Yeah. So Rich, did you have something, a comment?
No, I was just going to reinforce what Susan said. I mean, it's the step up from where number twos within functions have to now all of a sudden begin working with boards and third parties in some case. I think the step up is so big that what you want to do is kind of give somebody a safe zone so that they can be able to, and what I'm finding is in many cases they have the right instincts. Sometimes they need a little bit of help kind of looking around the corner at things, but what they really want is somebody to kind of validate some of the instincts. And once I start feeling like they have all the instincts and they're fully functioning as a C-suite executive, in this case a CHRO, I just offer up, if you need somebody every now and then just to bounce something off of, very available to do that. But the bulk of the work is really making sure that they get off to that great start.
Yeah, yeah. I would have loved to have had something like that. I was thrown into the CEO role, having just been a general manager at a company during the recession. So it was sort of a emergency type of situation. And yeah, it was like, okay, here you are. All of a sudden you're presenting to the board. You have, no exposure to these private equity guys. And, all of a sudden, you're in there. And so I actually put together kind of a personal board of advisors, and I had 2 CHROs on my board actually that were really helpful to me. So, but I had to go and find those people. And it took about a year and a half to really figure out who they were, and people, it just was a lot of time and effort, but that's amazing. I'd love to, do you guys mind if I just open your website real quick? Because I thought it was incredibly impressive, the executive partners. So I'm gonna, hold on a second. Let me share my screen real quick, just because I can see it doesn't mean you can, I guess. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. We can.
So Susan, want to walk us through? I mean, this is like, and look at that handsome guy right there in the middle.
Yeah, look at him.
Oh,
now,
boy.
this is really a global, we have coaches that have a global reach, if you will, and, their experiences, vary differently, from CEO to Chief Human Resource Officer, CFO. Many of our leaders have worked internationally, run companies, and most importantly have been, are currently on a number of boards. So, we've got folks that I think, depending upon the need that an organization would have, there's a very good chance that we would be able to support them through the amazing talent that we've been able to pull together. And we were really blessed to work with a partner from Russell Reynolds who had many contacts and connections. And we've even taken many of these people and did a little training on coaching and provided them some coaching skills. Certainly they most all know how to mentor and provide advice, but we kind of gave a tune-up, if you will, on some of the coaching skills. But as you can see, as you're streaming through here, we do have, we have an amazing group of talent. The other thing I'll mention is that when we do align one of these executive partners, they all are connected with each other. So if there's something unique or special, like M&A exposure, and if you're working with one of our partners, they can then reach into this council of leaders and bring forth someone if they have a specialty of experience and background. So it's not just one executive partner, but you have access to the whole group if need be.
Oh, what a unique model, and certainly very innovative. I like it. It's quite the dream team, and I'm just kind of curious about this. I know that companies typically sponsor executives, right? Like Rich, you would have sponsored an executive to go through a program like this, but do people actually want to pay for it themselves, even if their companies don't, just because it's like, you're at a certain level and you want to be super successful or keep your seat at the table? I'm curious if you get people who are like, I want to just do this myself.
Yeah, we've been there's a number of people who have expressed an interest. By and large, most are company sponsored. The company is either dealing with something disruptive and they're trying to help a leader deal with a particular situation, or frankly accelerate them to get to, as Rich said, that next level, which can be fraught with a lot of nuances. But we've seen both, but primarily supported by the business.
Yeah, because you want the business to be, I guess it has to be a holistic approach, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Impressive. Rich, any other comments or advice for our audience?
The only thing I would say is, because I've had experience, it's interesting when you were just scrolling through this, I've had experience at both Kraft Foods and McDonald's, and there are probably a third of these people here that I've known through my career, and some that I've just gotten to know through my own network as colleagues. And I would just want to underscore what Susan said. I mean, there's some great talent here, and I know the folks that are on here are going to be the types of folks that are going to be great listeners, and they're going to make sure that they set somebody up for success. So I think it is a unique model, but it's one that I think is going to pay off great dividends.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. This is amazing. And thanks so much, Rich, for sharing your valuable insight and advice to our audience. I know they're really going to appreciate it. We'll share comments. But Susan, I think we have some takeaways that people can download to help them with their whole succession planning process. And I'm just going to.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, if you go to our website or you just link into the site listed below here, you can download a couple white papers. They're not long and boring, I will say that. They're filled with some graphics and some quick understandings around accelerating success, and the focus is on CEO, CFO, CHR, CMOs, but some great data points, some information that frankly might be helpful for the Chief Human Resource Officer to use with the board as a data foundation for those discussions. So you can go right to those sites, download, and they're there for your taking. So feel free.
Yeah, that's really nice. So it's I'm just going to repeat it in case anybody's just listening to this on audio. It's https://bit.ly/ECC white paper, and we'll link to it in the show notes as well. All right.
Perfect.
So, well, thank you both for taking some time this afternoon to speak to our audience. I know they'll really appreciate it.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.